morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar today on nature-based solutions as a force towards a carbon-neutral future, presented by SGInnovate and DBS Sustaintech Xcelerator in support of Deep Tech for Good. My name is Brian, and for those of you who don't know about us, we are a government-owned organization in Singapore that invests in and help build deep tech startups, talent, and communities. At SGInnovate, our work involves connecting with the global deep tech ecosystem, working with entrepreneurial scientists to bring their innovative research from lab to market, as well as developing deep tech talent. Today, we have a group of amazing presentations from the 2021 DBS Sustaintech Xcelerator cohort, who will be sharing their solutions to improve buyer and investor confidence in nature-based solutions. After the presentations, we will then have a panel discussion and a Q&A session on the topic. I'd like to encourage our audience here today to share their thoughts on this topic and engage with our speakers by using the Q&A box below. And with no further ado, I will now pass the time to Bidyut from DBS, who will be introducing DBS. Bidyut, please.
Hello, and good morning, everyone. I'm not sure, some of you all do know that I've got, outside the bank, I also run a small little business on films. And I find that with films and sustainability, there's a bit of a correlation. And the correlation is passion. What you see in a film, of course, is the product. But I can assure you there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes around making a film. And I always say that there's more drama that happens behind the camera than happens in front of the camera. And when you come into sustainability, I find it similar. It's very driven by passion. It's driven because there is this inherent, I guess, intrinsic drive within the people that are working in this space to do above and beyond and more than just themselves. And the great thing is, through this Sustaintech X Accelerator, we were joined by wonderful partners, organizations like Temasek, the World Bank, NUS, Google, that all joined in, and the passion was the same within the organizations, but more and more when we interacted with all the startups, it is so rewarding and it's so inspiring to be around people that are passionate and that are doing something that is meaningful. So I'm hoping that through this event and through the showcase, you all will also get to see and feel, and hopefully maybe in the future touch that passion and that excitement and learn from it, just like I did. So thank you, SGInnovate, for the platform, for allowing Sustaintech to, I guess, have this medium and vehicle. And with that, I'm going to pass on to David, who is going to run us through the next segment. David, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vidyu, for sharing. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm David Ding, Head of Xcelerator at DBS Innovation. The Sustaintech Accelerator journey really started in December 2020. And together with our accelerator partners, Google Cloud, NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions, Temasek, Vera, and the World Bank, we launched our global application call for the very climate innovators. We were so encouraged and generally inspired by the range and quality of the 200 submissions from over 60 countries that came through. Yes, it's been my great pleasure, similar to what Vidyu shared, it is a humble experience to work with our inaugural cohort to build trust and boost confidence for nature-based solutions. Now, I'm super excited to introduce our 5 startups from Brazil, Canada, UK, and the US. Let's jump right in. Just one request, if you could please give us your undivided attention for the next 30 minutes to listen to what they have to offer. First up, let me invite Will Sheldon, Commercial Director of Farm Trace and Taking Root. Will is based in Vancouver, Canada. Over to you, Will.
Hi, SGInnovate. Thanks so much for having us. So the image that you're looking at here is of a piece of farmland in Latin America in the country of Nicaragua. And if you'd come here about 8 years ago, it would have looked entirely like it does on the left. Barren farmland that had been cleared historically of forests in order to grow crops. And these subsistence crops are earning the farmer now about $2 a day. Now, about 7 years ago, we started working with the farmer that owns this land to grow the trees that you can see on the right. And since then, by growing these trees alongside their existing crops, that farmer has grown 1,500 trees, which is sequestering 300 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere, helping to mitigate climate change, and earning additional revenues of upwards of $2,000, helping increase that farmer's income by upwards of 30%. My name's Will Sheldon. I'm the commercial director at FarmTrace, and we're catalyzing tropical reforestation. Now, here's the thing. Small-scale farmers here like Horatio represent one of the biggest and most effective solutions to tackle the climate crisis. There are 500 million small-scale farmers in the tropics who own and operate the majority of land that is available for reforestation and can deliver up to 1/3 of emission reductions to tackle the climate crisis. But the problem is, while lots of trees get planted in the tropics, very few grow to become thriving forests which effectively sequester CO2. And the biggest reason for that is that farmers are not incentivized to grow those trees over time. And there are two reasons for this. The first is that farmers just aren't aware that they could be making more money from growing trees as a crop like they do their existing crops. And second, even if they are aware, doing so is really complicated. Commercializing the carbon stored from trees is prohibitively time-consuming, in particular because monitoring is really complicated and relies on scarce expertise, which farmers just don't have. And so it doesn't make it worthwhile for them to grow trees and sequester carbon through them. And while there are lots of farmers that could be growing trees over time that aren't, there's huge demand from brands who have made climate commitments and want to invest in reforestation in order to sequester carbon to reduce their climate footprints. Enter FarmTrace. We help brands invest in reforestation to reduce their climate and carbon footprints and use that money to help farmers grow trees and sequester carbon on those brands' behalf over time. To date, we've had over 94% success rate in meeting our tree and carbon targets for brands. And in doing so, we're now working with 3,000 farmers around the world increase their incomes by growing 5 million trees each year. And we're sequestering 1.5 million tons of CO2 on behalf of brands. And by doing this, we are enabling $5 million of sales of carbon and trees. The reason this is possible, and we've had so much success to date, is because we have a team with over 50 years of experience building some of the largest and most high-quality reforestation initiatives in the tropics. And our on-the-ground experience, combined with the PhD-level expertise we have in the team, has meant that we've been able to build a simple, elegant, and practical solution that is effective on the ground to help farmers grow trees and commercialize those impacts. And this is how our solution works. Farmers and the organizations working with farmers upload simple farm and tree data from where they're growing their trees. We then combine this data with remote sensing and assess it using machine learning analytics to create forest and carbon assessments over time of that piece of land. And then as carbon gets sequestered, we package these impacts and deliver them to the brands that have paid for them. And the way FarmTrace makes money is by taking a small commission on that transaction. To date, the voluntary carbon market is currently worth $5.5 billion and is rapidly increasing, anticipated to be $50 billion by 2030. And we're on a mission to make sure that tropical reforestation is catalyzed through that journey and can use the carbon markets to grow as an effective solution to tackle the climate crisis. We want to become the world leaders in tropical reforestation. And so if you're a brand looking for trustworthy carbon credits and carbon impacts through reforestation, please do get in touch. In addition, if you're an investor and want to have preliminary conversations with us, we'd welcome the conversation. My name's Will Sheldon. Thanks so much for having us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Will. Yes, if you have opportunities with smallholder farmers, yes, farm trades will be the great opportunity to increase the co-benefits for the stakeholder farmers. Next, we have Petra Sikorsky, Director of Business Development of Cloud Agronomics. She's based in Boulder, Colorado, USA. Over to Petra.
Hey everyone, my name is Petra Sikorsky. I'm the Director of Business Development at Cloud Agronomics. Thanks for your time today, and I hope you enjoy a bit more information about our company. And if you'd like to follow up with any information, you can email me or my colleague, Nell Patterson. Cloud Agronomics is a company that is on a mission to become the standard for soil carbon quantification. In carbon projects, we quantify the amount of carbon in the soil. This sounds familiar because what does that today is physical soil sampling and biogeochemical modeling. The physical soil sampling is something we still incorporate into our models, and the biogeochemical modeling is very important. However, we don't believe we should be generating credits off of something that doesn't incorporate the in-field and variability. So what we've done, we've looked at the project developer economics, and we've looked at the ways that the projects currently in agriculture are operating and how much money they're making for each person that's involved in the project, the participants. And we found that with this cost-intensive and labor-intensive approach of physical soil sampling and biogeochemical modeling, which requires intensive audits, well, nobody's making a lot of money, and the farmers are not very inclined to enroll in these programs. But with our remote sensing approach, we believe that we can have returns as soon as 6 years for positive returns on these projects. So when we work with clients, all they need to give to us is the shapefile, and we need to know where the field is. And if you guys don't know what a shapefile is, that's fine. Someone you're working with will. So with remote sensing, additional localized data layers, and traditional sampling, we create a delivery of SOC quantification that is within 30 centimeters deep, and it's including in-field variability. So we see hundreds of data points for every field. With our technology, we have created a soil carbon quantification that is easy, reliable, and scalable. Today, using these three things to fast track the carbon markets in agriculture, we believe that we can reduce the cost to quantify, and in doing so, we're going to increase the amount of acres enrolled in these programs, which will help farmers, help the climate, and help agribusiness evolve from industrial agriculture into sustainable agriculture. Our team is poised to do this because we have experience from the big agriculture companies, so we understand farmers. We have experience with technology at NASA, at Sandia National Laboratories, at Brown, at the UN, at Esri. And today, we believe we've created this team that is ready to help revolutionize agriculture. And we hope that you will help us do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, dialing in from São Paulo, Brazil. Let's welcome Emily Shinzato, co-founder and director of people and performance at Trivia Forest Technologies. Over to you, Emily. You have the next 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm one of the co-founders of Trivia Forest Technologies. This amazing startup that's helping building a more sustainable future where people and forests are connected. Around the world, there are 4 billion hectares of forest lands considered essential to humanity. The monitoring of its quality, the monitoring of the carbon offsets are essential to tackle climate change effects. But how do we monitor and measure all those forest lands? We use this approach called forest inventory, This is the main approach used by companies, by governments to monitor all the forest assets, especially in nature-based solutions. But this method is very labor intensive. It has low precision data, and still it takes years to be done. Also, this approach is mainly used in the nature-based solution and projects, resulting in a huge difficulty in the scalability of its projects. So, how do we increase forest monitoring efficiency? At the same time, we decrease the costs. So back in 2016, a group of people passionate about forests, passionate about tech, gathered to found this amazing startup. And since then, we have developed this solution called the Smart Forest that I will explain to you guys how this solution works. So it's separated in 3 pillars. So the first one is where we have the ground truth, all the information coming from the field. So we have developed IoT sensors that we attach to the trees and started measuring remotely forest growth combined with climate variables. Then all the information is sent to our web platform, where here the magic really happens. There are many forest algorithms combined with artificial intelligence that is providing all this data into intelligence. And the third pillar is where forest managers can have access to all the information in very different reports and be aware of what's really happening in their forest assets and build a more sustainable environment. So here is a client that we have in the middle of the Amazon jungle that they have received money from some investor, and they have been planting mahogany culture and monitoring that with our Smart Forest solution. This other example here is from a forest company called Veracel that is monitoring their forest assets remotely, and at the same time they are increasing their professional skills to this new era, the era of data. Here we have continuous real-time and very precise information of the forest assets, and especially it's 100% auditable. All this information, all this technology, these products are happening together with these companies, these huge companies here in Brazil, to build a new future, a future with way more information and possibilities. It happens with our business model with a setup fee plus an annual fee, and we have demand for more than 20 countries. So Trivia was really born to be a global startup. So thank you guys so much for this opportunity, and I invite you all to join us as we are connecting 1 billion hectares of forests around the world. Thank you guys.
Wow, Emily and team, 1 billion hectares of forests. We really would, hope that they will come sooner. Well, that was from Brazil, and now let me introduce you, Topher White, dialing in from San Francisco, California, USA. He is the founder and CEO of Rainforest Connection. Topher, you have the 5 minutes. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me here today. Hi, I'm Topher. I'm here to talk to you about Rainforest Connection. We're a nonprofit tech startup, as David said, based out of San Francisco. We believe that it's the sound of the forest that can be used to both study and protect it. And of course, we've heard from some other partners why that's so important. So again, this is our idea. We believe you have to stop illegal logging, right? So what's our solution? Our solution is that the very moment a chainsaw goes off in the forest, the sound can be picked up by a device up in the treetops. Alerts can be transmitted over the cell phone network to local rangers on the ground who can get an alert on their phones and jump on their motorcycles and get out there and stop the rangers on the spot in this very realistic rendition of exactly how it happens in the forest at all times. This does rely, of course, upon a device up in the treetops, originally based on old smartphones, although we've moved beyond this at this point, with very powerful microphones and solar panels that can last for a very long time. Essentially, you are setting up one device that can cover large amounts of area with sound autonomously for years. This is, of course, what one of them looks like up in the treetops, and this is kind of the way it works. Again, no one's listening to these streams. We can pick out the sound of chainsaws automatically. As you can see from this animation, it's pretty easy to pick out a sound of a chainsaw. This one's pretty close, but we'll show you a little bit about how this works out there in the field. The point is that this is using AI and autonomous monitoring to monitor large amounts of area. So let's take an example. Let's go back to Brazil after where Emily just showed us a minute ago. We're going to look at the edge of the Amazon. This is the northern Brazil. You can see there's this ocean of deforestation, but some pretty intact parts of forest. These aren't necessarily traditional protected areas. These are indigenous reserves. This is the Tembe Indigenous Reserve right here. It's about 300 square kilometers of forest. This is the Tembe tribe themselves. They do have the rights over the land, but they don't have a lot of help in trying to protect it. And in fact, when we first met them in 2014, this entire purple area was occupied by illegal loggers, legal settlers, drug cartels, and the like. And the Tembe themselves realized that they were clustered into these two corners. They would have to rise up and stop it. We were able to provide some of our technology, and luckily at the same time they trained 30 indigenous rangers to be able to actually push back, with force the loggers that were there. And in this case, there was cell phone service in the area, but very, very, very sparse. So again, we're talking about cell phone towers that were a good 20 kilometers away from the borders of this reserve, which is why it's important for our technology. We're able to make use of the trees, the things that are already there. So the great things about trees is they're very tall in the forest. So you're able to put a device up there. It can pick up more sunlight. It can pick up cell phone service from a distance. And of course, even at that height, sound travels even further, which is why we're able to pick up chainsaws from well over a kilometer, sometimes 1.5 kilometers to 2 kilometers away. This is what that actually looks like there in the forest. Similar to the chainsaw you saw before, this is all being streamed up to the cloud, where we'll pick out the sounds with artificial intelligence. It's not that impressive to pick up a chainsaw such as this, but if you look at this, the reserve, it's very large, and so here's a real reading from the forest. So very, very faint sound of chainsaw. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but the AI is able to pick it out, and then of course send a real-time alert to rangers on the ground, allowing us to scramble, get out, and get rangers to the end of this road. To be able to intercept the vehicles themselves, stop the loggers, disable their equipment, burn the equipment, push the loggers out of their land, and disrupt the logging operations in a place where there is no law and order. They act as the law and order, trying to protect their land. And that's what our sort of theory of change is that there's all these groups, maybe not law enforcement in a lot of cases, who are the most impactful people for fighting climate change. As we know, protecting forests is necessary if we are to fight and reverse climate change. And in many ways, it's these guys out there in the middle of nowhere that can do the most. So it becomes our responsibility to build tech solutions for them. That's why we're backed by quite a few prestigious institutions, Sustaintech, no less and prestigious than these. And we look forward to being able to partner with you as well. But it's not just about law enforcement. In a lot of ways, we're trying to find what are the other ways that we can protect the forest by making it more valuable. So again, every device we put up, which again is just a cheap little device up in the treetops, is able to stream live, and anyone around the world can listen in and pick out and listen in just for the pleasure of listening in. That's not just, of course, for entertainment. We are able to use AI to scan through the database or scan through the sound as it comes in. Here you can see that there is there's actually a sort of a spectrogram. This is a stream of sound coming in from our devices, and we are able to actually pick out the sounds of individual species down to the second resolution, as you can see here. This is the same system we're using to pick out chainsaws in the cloud. We are amassing a massive database, and this allows us to measure biodiversity as well as the intensity of different species distributions simply based upon audio. Audio is incredibly powerful. In fact, I would say it is perhaps the least utilized and most powerful tool out there for measuring and protecting our living planet. based upon this idea, we are setting out to build this nervous system for the natural world. The same way that your nervous system will tell you when there's pain, when there's heat, when there's fire, when there's a prick, when there's a cut. Of course, that's the pain, that's the chainsaw. But there's so much more you can pull out of it from around the world. The same way the human body is able to tell what's happening in the furthest reaches of your body, we can build the same thing with a network such as this to be able to understand what's happening in the furthest reaches of nature and bring those insights back to us using senses that we ourselves may not have been able to make use of anyway, AI and large-scale acoustic monitoring. That's why our technology, as you can see here, is deployed all across the world, 38 countries so far and many more to come. It's useful in many different ways in which people would try and use it on the ground. This is this idea that we can take the fabric of an entire area of forest and map it temporally, not just on which species are there at a particular moment, but a resolution from the second stretched out to years at a time, and be able to see the way that species themselves move through. This is incredibly, this is most possible with sound, because sound is not limited to just what you can see in front of you. It travels throughout the forest. But these platforms, of course, are only as useful as those who use them. So we want to make use of these same web platforms as you see here to allow scientists to go in. If they know a species they can see, they're able to pull it up in our database, circle it right there in the spectrogram. This is a web interface that anyone can use for free. And just based upon that, they're able to say that's this species, and then trigger off a search through our entire database, allowing you to pull out dozens or hundreds of examples from our years and years and years of audio from each location. And then this allows very quickly people to actually add to our species database that we have, and not just database, but our sort of automatic searching. So here's the result of what you just saw. Here in this just 2 to 5 minutes of audio, you're actually seeing almost a dozen species just clustered into this one area, all available. This sort of functionality is available for every second of every minute of every month, year that's in our database across the entire planet. And that, what I think, is what's really in front of us. The ability to make incredible interfaces that bring this raw data to the people who can use it the most. That really comes into play when you start looking for very rare things. Birds are one thing, frogs are another, but this example is a species of elephant in the forest. A Cornell Lab of Ornithology had recorded 120 years worth of audio, and their challenge was to find the elephant. Well, we cross-loaded into our system, had a couple of interns look through it for a couple of days, and indeed they were able to find hundreds upon hundreds of examples of elephants that these partners had been so desperate to find that they were willing to offer this huge database out for free. This is an elephant walking through the forest, grumbling to himself or herself. We think it's beautiful, and this will allow us to build really, really powerful tools to, for example, mitigate human-wildlife conflict, to be able to know when elephants are streaking onto the. Oh, here's an elephant further away. Okay. Again, this is it's important for us to not think this is such an operation. This is the device that you see up in the tree. It all fits into a bag that can be carried for miles and miles and miles through the forest. Installing it is as easy as climbing a tree, which looks a little harder than it is, but everyone on the ground can be trained to do it. And it's really important for us to make sure that we are not involved in the installation, so this can spread into the many hundreds of thousands around the world necessary to achieve our goals. You can see the whole thing can be put up pretty quickly. Like this. And it's not just limited to forest. One last thing, we are really focused on the platform. What is everything we can achieve with cloud-based acoustic monitoring? Bioacoustics is a field that almost seems to be defined by its limitations. We want to break through all of those by breaking assumptions. Just as easy as our system works in the forest, you can make use of it underwater, such as here in Vancouver Bay, where these whales, these orca whales are often in shipping lanes. They want to be able to strip them out. We're able to send alerts to local authorities so they can actually go clear the shipping lanes when the orcas come around, just based on AI detection in real time of these whales. So instead of building this system, they sound so cool. They sound wonderful. So instead of building the system for a singular purpose, which of course is to protect forests originally, we built it in a generic way that allows you to make use of the overall capabilities, possibilities, I guess, of acoustics. And we are just barely scraping the surface of that. So please come speak to us if you're interested in making use of this platform or anything else that we can build. We'd love to work with you. Thanks so much.
Wow. I really enjoy the audio live feed from all the forests. Thank you so much, Topher. Next, we have Elle from London, co-founder and CEO of Xcelerator. This is our last presentation from the founders. Over to Elle.
Hi there. My name's Alistair and I'm the CEO of Xcelerator. You may have heard the phrase, measure what matters. Well, at Xcelerator, we believe that protecting and restoring the carbon stored in the forest and soil is the single biggest lever to hitting net zero by 2050. But the challenge is, how do we finance protection and restoration of natural sinks at the scale that's required when they're currently not properly measured? Let's just step back to get some perspective. What does net zero even look like? Well, it requires halving our emissions over the next decade and then doing the same thing again over the next 20 years. Is there the intent to actually do that? Well, yes, it kind of looks like there is. We have now 40 trillion of assets under management by some of the biggest asset managers globally to convert to net zero management of debt and equity. You have the large corporates accelerating their commitments towards net zero, and you have the national and multilateral institutions committing to financing on the ground activity. But where is the data infrastructure that facilitates efficient capital allocation? Well, the page is blank for a reason. The Task Force for Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets has said this, and we agree, that a resilient, flexible infrastructure would enable the voluntary carbon market to function effectively. And that's the missing link. So Xcelerator is providing the data that allows carbon in natural sinks to be restored and protected. You can think of us as the Moody's for carbon offsets. We provide ratings on offset performance and quality. We make all types of nature-based carbon projects comparable and make their performance transparent. And because we don't sell offsets or develop projects, we are completely independent. That means we can provide any stakeholder accurate, up-to-date data that's free from conflict of interest. Our technology makes what's happening on the ground transparent using satellite imagery and machine learning. However, that's not enough. Crucially, you need to relate that reality on the ground to the quantitative goals and aims that's expressed in the project documentation or the issuance of credits onto markets. In addition to that, we provide a full assessment of the additionality and the permanence of any project in a standardized framework. And we're not stopping there. There's significant potential to improve the accuracy and the granularity of tracking natural carbon sinks. Our team is out in the field in Gabon right now, performing multi-scale LiDAR and harvest calibration of carbon in primary and secondary rainforests. We're using this raw data and improving on state-of-the-art methods to process this data into insight that's actionable, putting that data into the hands of the stakeholders that can value these systems and protect them and restore them, and change the incentives from destruction to restoration. In summary, we provide that missing link, the data infrastructure that can let the world deliver net zero collectively together. We believe that this is only possible with the world coming together to deliver this mission, and our mission has collaboration at its heart. So please do let us know if we can help you. Thanks.
Thank you, Elle and Team Xcelerator. Yes, these are the 5 startups of Sustaintech Xcelerator 2021 cohort. If you have any interest in forest MRV, soil MRV, remote sensing, bioacoustic, co-benefits, any area related to nature-based solution using technology, please reach out directly to the team, or you can reach out to us at hello@sustaintechx.com. Topher, Emily, and Petra will join in the panel later. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat and send your questions. They will be able to answer you during the panel. Now it's time for me to hand it over to Hui Ying. We're going to moderate the exciting panel lined up for you next. Over to you, Hui Ying.
Thank you, David. Truly fascinated with the sharing of the exciting green technology. And hello, everyone. It is an honor to be part of this exciting green conversation. Good morning if you're in Singapore or this part of the world. Good afternoon, good evening to those dialing in from other parts of the world. I'm Hui Ying from SGInnovate, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion on nature-based solutions as a force towards a carbon-neutral future. We are very privileged to have a panel of very experienced and enthusiastic sustainability champions with us today. On our panel today, we have Mr. Frederick Teo, Managing Director, Sustainable Solutions from Temasek, Dr. Kelly Simon, Postdoctoral Research Fellow from NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions. We have Ms. Emily from Trivia, Ms. Petra from Cloud Agronomics, and Mr. Topher White from Rainforest Connections. These three so-called who has presented earlier on the exciting technology that their respective companies are developing. Personally, very excited to learn more about nature-based solutions from our panelists today and its potential to, or more critically, climate crisis. Again, to our audience here today, if you do have any burning questions that you would like to raise along this conversation, feel free to post your questions here on the Q&A box. We will try our very best to answer them. Without further ado, let's jump right in for a quick round of introduction by our panelists. We have a special request here by David to also include the mention of your favorite ice cream flavor. So Dr. Kelly Simon, perhaps you can get us started, following by Frederick, Emily, and Topher. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Hui Ying and David and SGInnovate and the Sustaintech panel. So thank you for having us on here. So my name is Dr. Kelly Simon. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions at NUS. The center is a focal point for world-class research, thought leadership, and education on nature-based climate solutions and adaptation throughout the Asia-Pacific region. The center brings together an interdisciplinary group of researchers to produce credible, salient, and legitimate science, policy-relevant science that informs nature-based climate strategies and actions to build capacity and empower leadership in the public, private, and people sectors, and respond to climate change challenges and opportunities, not just in our region, but connecting up to the globe as well. So thank you, Hui Ying. And my ice cream flavor, boysenberry with warm caramel sauce on top.
Wait, I guess it's my turn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fred from Temasek. I run the Sustainable Solutions team here. In this role, we are looking at how we can actually catalyze and support the development of interesting solutions to tackle some of the greater sustainability challenges that we are facing. In particular, there are three areas that we look at. One is in the area of decarbonization, where we have an alternative clean energy program. The second area is really in terms of urban sustainable solutions. This includes solutions that can help us improve energy efficiency or perhaps lower the embodied carbon in some of our built environment materials. And then the last area is the one that we are looking at today, which is on climate and nature solutions. So I think I'm kind of like plain. So I guess my favorite ice cream flavor probably would be something like chocolate.
Thanks. Fred. Emily, could we get you to go next?
Okay. So thank you guys for this opportunity. So as you guys saw from the pitch video, Trivia is a startup that is focusing in forest monitoring, especially using IoT solutions and combining that with our system that we call Smart Forest. I am one of the founders. I am also a forest engineer. So I have this passion for forests and at the same time, a passion for people. So Trivia was this great opportunity for me to gather all those passions. So as a founder, we have the freedom to choose the name of our job. So I myself, I am a head of people and performance there in Trivia, and it composes our actual moment in the startup. So start with an idea, and then prototyping, and then generating the commercial product. And at the same time, you're also structuring the company and also developing people from the team. So yeah, so head of people and performance as well. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Emily. And Topher, would you like to go next?
Sure. I couldn't have said that better, Emily. That's the thing, especially in conservation. Performance is what we aim for. We love building cool things, but ultimately it's people who will, perform the conservation that we need. That's huge to our thing. My background is mostly in physics and engineering. I was lucky to be in the right place in the right time and suggest a crazy idea to somebody who said, please build that. And it was only later that I realized there was much that it could apply to climate change solutions. Yes, I feel like so many cool things unfold in front of us all the time. Again, we'll try to catch chainsaws, then realize there's so much happening in the forest beyond that. But yeah, it's difficult herring work to see the way people are in the field putting themselves on the front lines, and the best we can do is to try and help them protect themselves and the forest that they'd like to. Oh, and favorite ice cream flavor. I hope this is international. Baskin Robbins rainbow sherbet. Does that work?
Perfect, Topher.
Thanks.
And last but not least, we have Petra with us, but unfortunately she has some issues with her video connection. But regardless, I think, Petra, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, hi everyone. As I said on our discussion about remote sensing solutions for soil carbon quantification, and I saw someone on the panelists say that a lot of these solutions look like they're tracking the measurement and what is it actually doing for the soil carbon sequestration. And I'm excited to be part of this conversation because that's why I joined this field and this company with Cloud Agronomics. So my background is in public policy with scaling organic farming solutions for local areas in Los Angeles. And I said to myself, there needs to be a technology solution if agriculture is going to be a part of the solution for climate change. So my favorite ice cream flavor is mint chocolate chip, and I'm very, very lucky to be here with this profoundly intelligent group of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. And now I think I will jump right in to kickstart today's session with the first question. I will start with Frederick, to get some views from him, given that he's representing one of the strong sustainability advocates here in Singapore. It has been encouraging to see how much Temasek as a company has been pushing to achieve ambitious green goals. Could you share with us, from the perspective of a corporate organization, what are some of your considerations when you look at developing decarbonization strategy? And how will nature-based solutions, in this case, fit into this strategy?
Thanks a lot for the question, Hui. I think the first thing that I would say is that there is no one-size-fits-all silver bullet solution to decarbonization and tackling the very serious challenge of climate change. In fact, it's really a climate crisis or climate emergency today, right? So maybe I can just offer a very quick frame in terms of how we can think about it. The first one is that I think that you need to have a portfolio approach to the different solutions, right? Because different aspects of different industries may find different solutions much more applicable for them. Take, for example, in aviation, they would be looking at sustainable aviation fuel, which is something that the industry is talking about today. In other pollutive industries, we may be thinking about carbon capture capabilities. And in some other really hard to abate sectors, we may need to think about carbon abatement strategies like using nature-based carbon credits, for example. So a portfolio approach. The second aspect of looking at solutions really is in terms of having different time dimensions or different time horizons for the solutions. Some of the things are actually a lot more economically feasible today. Carbon credits that are originating from nature-based solutions offer a cost-effective way to do something today, right? And it is important to think about what you can do in the near term. But in the longer term, as technologies mature, as solutions scale up, they can reach a price point where it may become feasible for companies to adopt. When we think about different kinds of carbon capture technologies today, some of them are north of $100 US per ton for carbon capture. But if we are able to actually get that down into a price point that is a little bit more feasible for many of the companies to adopt, then we can do it. But we need to start to invest in those solutions today in order to allow them to become feasible maybe in some years down the road. So I think by balancing a portfolio of solutions, as well as looking at different time horizons, that's probably the way that we want to think about different types of sustainable solutions.
Right. Thank you for the insights, Frederick. Maybe next I'll turn to Dr. Simon to help us understand a bit more about nature-based solutions, right? Given that that's the really key topic that we want to talk about. When we talk about nature-based solutions, could you help us understand what are some examples of these solutions? And what are some of the exciting work that has been carried out in the NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions related to these solutions?
And thank you for the great setup, Frederick. So nature-based climate solutions are ultimately solutions that are carbon captured from the sun, right? So any type of biomass that photosynthesizes and then transplants that carbon down and sequesters it. These technologies, that's just nature. It's been around for millennia. And so what we need to do is really harness that photosynthetic carbon capture. It's scalable, it's readily available, but we just haven't valued it to the point where we are able to scale it up, right? So we've extracted from nature far more than we've actually sequestered. And Fred mentioned, in our region at least, there are acute impacts that are being felt. And I'm going to touch briefly on the economic analyses of this. And so in this region in particular, there are 4 different scenarios. So if we keep on with business as usual scenarios, by 2050, the GDP, global GDP will be lost by about 18%. Our region here, ASEAN, will be hit by 37.5% loss. That's in the worst case scenario. And so we really need to catalyze every type of solution, not just nature-based climate solutions, but everything that Fred mentioned, that portfolio analysis. But what we do have is what we can to try to mitigate some of these is implement any type of nature-based climate solutions that we have. And Southeast Asia, our region, has the highest amount of biodiversity and highest amount of carbon anywhere in the world. And so the opportunity that we have here to actually make a profit, return on investment for these carbon credits is quite high. So what we're doing at the center is a lot of quantification of these carbon credits. How much do we have? How do we actually layer and understand the different types of competing land uses? So we already have some small scale holders, and we don't want to displace any indigenous or small scale holders that are already potentially using that area. And so we're working on many spatial analyses to understand where the highest return on investment, where the best place to invest in these carbon credits are at the moment.
Thank you for that sharing, Kelly. I think what we gathered here today is that nature-based solutions would definitely be important to complement other form of solutions to decarbonize. I think from some of the question and Q&A that we have, and also perception, some experts do express concerns over efficacy of nature-based solutions. So how do we then ensure that there are real benefits in this mentioned nature-based solutions? And what would be some of the methods or that has to be in place to ensure responsible implementation and use of these nature-based solutions? I'm not sure, maybe Frederick or Kelly, would you like to take this question?
Quick, maybe I'll start and then Kelly can also weigh in, and I think some of our founders would also be able to do so. I think that when we talk about nature-based solutions, the first thing that we need to start with is robust science. And that is the reason why even at Temasek, we collaborate with experts like Kelly and others at the universities in order to be able to get the science right. Like, for example, if we talk about 1 hectare of mangrove, right? How much carbon is actually being sequestered? That is a science question. It isn't an economics or a commercial question. It's a science question. Now, the moment that we get the robust science right, then the kind of capabilities that Topher, Emily, and the rest of the guys that presented today bring, then will allow us to be able to monitor and verify the kind of signals that they can pick up whether it's through sound, it's through satellite imaging or other kinds of things, to be able to then say, okay, this is the data we can collect. The science tells us that this translates into X number of tons per hectare or whatever that is. And that allows us to be able to build more robust business models around that. Now, today, if, for example, a hectare of mangrove, say, for example, can actually sequester 10 tons per year. But we are not able to kind of like prove that through science. Then what happens is that all of us need to take a little bit of a credibility discount. We can't actually sell for 10 tons. We may have to sell for only 1 or 2 tons, which is much more believable. And as a result, the entire economics of that project gets affected. The project developers lose something, the local communities lose something, the investors lose something, and the entire world lose something. So actually, it is much more important for us to get the science right. And I think Kelly can probably expand a little bit on how we can get that verification going.
Thanks, Fred. So we do have a pretty high discount factor when it comes to carbon credits. And it's exactly from what Frederick was mentioning. So we really need to get the science right. And that's exactly what our center does, the Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions. In addition, on the market currently, what we have is that 1 carbon credit of, say, a palm plantation, it could be 1 hectare of palm plantation, is the same as 1 hectare of a pristine primary rainforest. And so intuitively, we know that there's far more value in that pristine rainforest than that palm plantation. And so what we also need to understand is to be able to implement and quantify within that equation what the co-benefits, right? So all the other co-benefits that come from that pristine rainforest. And ultimately, that's going to bring a higher price point to that particular carbon credit. So co-benefits, what are co-benefits? So it's basically all the extra things that come along, right? So it's the biodiversity, it's the ecosystem services that we as humans enjoy, it's the clean air, it's the water filtration. And so biodiversity, it ultimately comes from the rainforest, right? And so if we invest in nature-based climate solutions, biodiversity increases. And so biodiversity is not just a co-benefit, but also a building block of healthy ecosystems. So by investing and protecting in forests, we protect its biodiversity. And so ultimately, that biodiversity is not reflected in the price point. It's not internalized into that economic analysis. And that's part of what we're working on at the center so that we can actually figure out an accurate price point for carbon on the market.
Great. Thank you. Emily, Topher, any thoughts on this? Yeah, maybe we can jump a bit, deeper to another level, understanding this so-called concerns again on measurement and monitoring, right? I have maybe a bit of a more detailed question for the startups here today. If you could help us understand a bit more on what is currently done in the verification process, and what are some of the gaps in the solutions today, and what can be done to solve these issues. I think some of our audience here also have questions, trying to really understand, what is really being done to verify the results that you get on the ground.
Emily, you want to take that first? Or I can go.
Okay. Trivia works basically with IoT sensors. So we automatize the field collection information and sends information through internet where forest managers can have access to that. So in this process, we are changing a lot the way it's done today. So we use like forest inventory approach, where you have many people going to the field, is measuring tree by tree. So it's a very exhaustive process and providing very information with low precision. Okay, so generating a lot of estimate errors, and also it's like done once a year, once in 2 years. Say to have information like once a day, it's a very game-changing thing because you enable new possibilities for the forest sector, like enabling more researches, enabling the conservation approaches. And so Trivia bring this technology to help with this type of NEBS projects. Maybe you can go now, Topher.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's in our case, there's a couple ways to approach that. We are capturing the raw data itself, right? This is, we're saying like we're actually recording audio and saving it up to the cloud. So whether or not there's a chainsaw going off, whether or not there's an animal there, actually there's very little debate about that, given the experts able to identify it. So we always have, whether it be for forensic value or scientific value, we're able to back that up. However, what really matters is whether someone goes to stop it, right? And those are the partnerships that we have to build. And verifying that, first of all, verifying the accuracy of our alerts, that's something we had to take a lot more responsibility for over the last year and a half. But in doing so, we found that it was better to build a relationship with the people on the ground and then begin to advise them on how best to respond. Because the truth, and I could say this, is that even if people think they're going to respond to chainsaw alerts and stop loggers, even if they think they're going to protect those areas, they most likely will find reasons not to in the moment, because it's dangerous and difficult and there's uncertainty involved. So our relationship with people there on the ground to be able to coach them through the data they're seeing, and then also in the process find out if they're responding. And I'd say that most of the time it's a challenge on our side and theirs to figure out how to stop it, but we're trying to get better at that with time. But yeah, verification is through conversation. That's all we have.
Hui, may I also offer just a very quick framework of understanding how the verification thing works, right? If there are actually members in the audience that's actually looking at coming up with interesting solutions, maybe we can bear in mind 4 Ps in terms of their considerations. And it solves for some of the pain points when we are thinking about nature-based solutions and some of these projects. The first P, I would say, is about persistence. The idea really is that many of the verification efforts today for nature-based projects are oftentimes, because it's extremely manual, you cannot actually be on the ground for a long period of time. But if you can be constantly monitoring what is actually going on with your project, that adds to the quality of the verification, so persistence. Second is actually pervasiveness, or being pervasive. And the idea really is that as we want to scale up, we're not talking about a small plot of land, we are maybe talking about large tracts of land, right? And how are you able to provide pervasive coverage and monitoring of your entire project? Okay, so what is wide area? What is actually low energy that can actually go all over? The third area is about precision or being precise. Because if you're not precise enough, you don't actually get a sense of actually what is happening. So for example, in Topher's work, a lot of the analysis is actually on the back end to understand when they pick up the sound, what is the sound actually telling you? Is it something that is human? Is it something that's natural? And would it be able to automatically try and identify that for you? And the last one, of course, is very important because if we want to scale, and that is about the 4th P is about price. And that is understanding what is the cost of deployment. So it's something that can be very precise, pervasive, persistent, but it's extremely costly. You know that this is not a solution that can scale. So if you remember these 4 Ps of the considerations for what makes a solid, scalable, good quality verification solution, I think that would probably help. Thanks.
Right. Thank you for that, Frederick. I think it helped us to be able to think about this more structurally. Then it brings me to my next question to then also find out, is there any form of regulations or standards that are currently available in the market when it comes to looking at this verification process?
Yeah, I'll take that. There's a number of different verification schemes. Most of them are on the voluntary market. Vera is pretty much the gold standard at the moment. There's always room for improvement. Much like I said earlier, with 1 carbon credit of palm plantation equals, pristine rainforest. And so what we really need to do is to improve on these technologies. And a lot of the 5 finalists here add to that suite of the technologies that can help verify those credits as well. Now, there's a number of other different technologies that can go into these standards, and that's what we're working on at the center as well. So there's NFT blockchain technologies. So like once we actually work with the Climate Impact Exchange, which just started here through DBS, and if we get a carbon credit, we are able to track it, and not just track it, but we can see how the land use has changed. Has it increased in carbon? Has it decreased in carbon? And so as we track it through time, we're able to understand and alter the price based on the different verification of that technology. Now, there's multiple different types of technology that we can assess that carbon. NASA and many other space agencies are working with satellite technologies, remote sensing technologies. And then we've got like Cloud AG with hyperspectral imaging, which is really up and coming. We can relatively look at above ground biomass quite decently, but it's the below ground biomass, especially in mangroves and blue carbon, that we really have a hard time with the technology. So that's where we're coming into. There are different types of technologies such as INS, that's inelastic neutron scattering through gamma ray analyses, usually on drones. And there's also ground penetrating radar that we're working on. And so there's all these different suites of technology that need to come together and advance so that we can actually quantify that carbon, to also get it verified. And as Fred mentioned, get it to a price point that reflects the value of the ecosystem.
Right. Thank you so much on that, both Fred and Kelly. Just one to jump in on the point on price. I think Fred, you mentioned about importance of price. Kelly, you mentioned that as well. And I think there are some questions from the audience as well about how viable commercially are these solutions today. Anyone would like to take this?
Yeah, I'll take that. So. Oh, go ahead, Fred.
No, please go, Kelly. I'll jump in.
Okay. So from a nature-based climate solutions, it's readily available, it's readily scalable, and the price point's quite low. In terms of other technologies, I'm not sure about exact prices on, say, like satellite imagery, INS, but I'll flip it back and say, we can't not afford to use those technologies, given where we're at, and given that 2030 is a point where we will hit a tipping point of increasing the temperatures to 4 degrees Celsius. So I would say we can't afford not to deploy it, but we also have to just use every suite of solution that's possibly out there, and starting with nature-based climate solutions, obviously because I'm biased, but it's cheap and readily available and scalable.
In our case, I think we focus on the raw data we can pull out of it. Of course, there's really great ways to use remote sensing that you spoke of to measure carbon stocks, combined with what Emily and her team are working on to measure them in a very precise way on the ground. In our case, we're not focused on carbon. We're trying to find all of the kind of hidden value in the biodiversity of the forest and the threats. And I can tell you, there's not enough of a market for bioacoustics and science to support that kind of work. So we're trying to find all the different ways that we can, but I believe there's really amazing stuff that's in there. We just have to make it interesting and useful and relevant to more people. And we are willing to be at the forefront of that and try it all. We'll let you know.
To add, so what Topher is measuring is actually the co-benefits of those carbon credits, right?
Right.
And so all of that data basically informs and gives a more accurate price point of the value and the richness of that carbon credit. So we need all these different hierarchical levels of technologies that inform that economic price point.
Right. I guess in this case, it's important for investors to be so-called aware and also educated as to, what are the various co-benefits. Sorry, Fred, you would like to add something?
No, Hui Ling, just something very, very quickly in terms of the metric, right? Is this. We now know that the sale of carbon credits, it can be ranging anywhere from, say, a few US$ per ton and northwards. So the question that we should ask ourselves really is that as we layer on different types of cost elements to this, right? So for the verification capabilities, how much are we adding per ton of carbon credits that we're actually selling? Because that allows you to be able to then understand the economics of what is actually left over. Right. So you know that, for example, if now when you deploy solutions that it is costing maybe $20, $30 per ton of carbon credit in order to improve verification, that is likely to be difficult to actually achieve, because then it's already potentially higher than the price of what carbon credits could actually be sold for. So now many of the solutions that the guys are coming up with are actually scalable. So that basically means that the marginal cost of actually, covering an extra acre, an extra hectare also is actually potentially close to zero. And if that is actually the case, then you actually allow with scale to actually bring down the cost per ton. And that is actually why that scalability component of it and watching for the price of what verification does to the overall cost of carbon credit per ton is important. Thanks.
Right.
No, I'll add to that as well. With COP26 coming up, so that's going to be through in the UK in October, November.
Yep.
There's going to be a big push to actually focus on the economics of actually valuing nature. And so it's been discounted throughout all of our economic analyses. There's a report that just came out in April called the Dasgupta report. Highly recommended, although it's 611 pages, so maybe the executive summary for many of you. But what the ultimate aim of that was to understand what is the value of nature in our economic models. So right now our GDP is based on a faulty application of economics. And so it doesn't take nature in as a depreciation of an actual asset, right? So we have our biosphere and it's degrading. And so we need to look at it not just as a thing that we extract from, but as a sector, right? So we need to incorporate that into our GDP and economic analyses, and specifically at the national level. And with ASEAN, with the NDC, so the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Climate Agreement, overall, we need to understand how to get the finance to implement nature-based climate solutions. And that is valuing nature and being able to implement it in those national economic policies to the point where we look at it from the sectoral level. So we look at energy, we look at roads and transportation and mining as a mesosector. And I would go one step further with the Dasgupta report and say that we need to look at nature as a mesosector as well.
Thank you so much for the insights. I really wish we have more time to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we are coming to the close of the event. So before we wrap up, I would like to pose one last broad question to our esteemed panelists. Basically, what can we do with this call to action, right? So what can individuals like me or our audience here today, or someone representing an organization, do more to support further development or adoption of nature-based solutions, or in the broader context, to decarbonize? Anyone would like to start first?
I think that in any organization or as individuals, I think the first thing is actually to build an awareness around what the impact actually is and what is the cost of inaction. I think that is probably a good starting point. Understand what is actually happening. The second thing is, I think, to educate and to raise awareness around the range of options that we have. Right? As individuals, we can think about just saving water, not wasting electricity, being more conscious about the way that we travel. So these are simple things, or the kind of food that we eat, right? So these are simple individual choices. As a corporate, I think it is important to begin to measure, because I think whatever doesn't get counted will not count. So it is important to just understand a few key metrics around the footprint that you are actually imposing on the environment, like whether or not it's carbon emissions, your electricity consumption, your water consumption, waste, use of paper, so on and so forth. Just being a little bit more conscious, measuring it, and then seeing how you can actually mitigate that. And then at the level of a country, obviously, in addition to measurements, we are thinking about policies and regulations that can incentivize and also disincentivize bad behavior. But I think I will leave off with actually one important point. Many of us sometimes, when we look at this entire issue and we think, oh my goodness, this is such a big problem, right? What can I as an individual do, right? It's like that little starfish that you throw back into the sea, right? There'll still be lots of other starfish on the beach. But it's important to not let, perfection, Kelly and I discussed this yesterday or the day before, that we don't let perfection get in the way of good enough. We can wait for the perfect solution. We think that, but we should actually start with whatever we can, and something that is good enough, something that we can do to contribute in our own small way, do it. Because your inaction at that point in time means that something is not being done. So I think that's how I would probably frame the issue. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. So the quote that I always use is perfection is the enemy of the good. And I use that in so many facets of my life. But a lot of times people feel a bit of doom and gloom when it comes to climate change. And it's really daunting to work on climate science and just see that the data coming out. But if we sat back and did nothing, then what does it say about our value for future generations and our ecosystems? And so what we need to do is basically everything that we can at different scales. So it's lowering, or it's increasing the air con a bit, or it's shutting it off entirely. It's making sure that energy efficiency is part of your overall personal ecosystem. It's decarbonization of companies and corporations and city-states. And through that decarbonization and energy efficiency, only then should we look at carbon offsets and the market. But companies and people should be doing everything they can to decarbonize in the process. And I'll leave you with one thing as well, is that we need strong policies to enforce and to be able to incentivize decarbonization, as well as the increase of these technologies.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. Petra, would you like to go next? Emily?
So I think Frederick and Dr. Kelly said it all. And I would just add the one saying that we have on Trivia, that we like to connect people. So this event is just amazing because we're connecting very inspirational people together, bringing these new ideas regarding sustainability. So this is a mission that we have to also connect people to bring these new insights and go into this path to sustainability. And participating of a Sustaintech Xcelerator, we're also validating our solution and understand new possibilities and new markets where Trivia could fit in. So I would suggest to foment this type of events and gathering startups, universities, companies, governments to increase this pool of so much energy and inspirational people. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Topher, last words from you.
I think we should leave it at that. I could go on for too long. Thanks, Emily. That was the best way to say it.
Thank you. I'm just going to check in to see if Petra is still around. Okay, maybe she's having some issues with connection. Okay, with that, I think we have come to the end of this session. It has certainly been enlightening and in fact, very encouraging and heartening. I hope this conversation has inspired you in one way or another to do more. I think we all have a part to play, however big or small. So thank you once again to our panelists for your insightful sharing, and thank you for attending today's session. I'll hand over the session back to Brian.
Thanks, Fei.
Thank you.
I also like to thank all our panelists for today, Kelly, Frederick, Topher, Petra, and Emily for sharing their valuable insight and knowledge. A special shout out as well to the team from Sustaintech Xcelerator for their help with organizing this event. Unfortunately, we weren't able to cover all your questions today due to time constraints, but I'd very much like to thank our audience today for engaging with us and sending in your questions. For our audience today, do take note that we will also be sending out a post-event email with any important information that you'll need, including a recording for this webinar. So do keep an eye out for that. And with that, we have come to the end of our session today. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday morning with us. And on behalf of SGInnovate, I would like to wish you all a great week ahead, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next event. Thank you. Could I get all the speakers for the photo?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. If you could just do a little wave to your camera. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, cheese. One more. Thank you. You send over the image after the event. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Great session.
Thank
Have
you
a
for
great day.
Thanks a lot,
organizing.
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys organizing. Cheers. Bye.
Topher.